July 1985. It's a mysterious homicide right from the start. 3 bodies floating in the Miami River.
They weren't shot, they weren't beaten up, they just drowned. How did that happen?
And the mystery explodes into a case that shocks a city and a nation.
We knew it was bad. I don't think we knew it was that bad.
How could the good guys be such bad guys?
When you're a cop and you're from Cuba, you're making more money than they ever made in their entire life.
And how did they get away with it for so long?
You had officers begging these guys, hey, next time you're gonna do a rip, take me with you, I need the money.
Cocaine, cops, killers, and cash. This is Miami. This is the 80s. Scandal doesn't get any better than this. You think it's hot now in Miami? You should have been here in the 80s. If you have money, Miami's the place to be. If you don't have money and want some, it's an even better place. If you buy or sell cocaine. $600 worth of coca leaves makes cocaine worth $600,000 in the States. That's what you call profit. Mo Fitzgibbon is a journalist and filmmaker who's been studying the Miami drug trade for years.
You had Cuban drug dealers and you had Colombian drug dealers. Those 2 groups just sort of slammed into one another. It just became really like the Wild Wild West.
Coke is so big a deal in Miami that the DEA sets up a new division to fight it. They call it CENTAC, for Central Tactical Unit. 3 CENTAC cops know the game better than anybody. Alex Alvarez, George Plasencia, and Al Singleton. They're all veterans of Miami PD.
Probably 80% of the drugs that were coming into the U.S. was coming in through South Florida. So we had the shootings, we had shootings down major freeways, we had shootings at shopping malls.
We said, what in the hell are we up against? And one of the most immediate reactions to a lot of us, myself included, was to trade in that 6-shot 38 that was issued to us that we all carried and at least get an automatic pistol.
Unless you caught somebody in the act of the murder, the chances of solving a drug-related murder in Miami during the 80s was very, very slim until CENTAC was formed.
On July 29, 1985, the CENTAC cops are called to a crime scene that seems pretty routine. But a few things just don't make sense.
We received a call that 3 bodies had floated up in the Miami River. What they saw right away, and the reason that we were called, is that they were wearing designer jeans, they had wads of money in their pockets, they had beepers, they had guns in their waistbands. So obviously, you know, these guys didn't go in for a midnight dip in the Miami River and drown. You know, we were going like, well, you know, how do these 3 drug dealers end up in the river? And there's really no sign of trauma. They weren't shot, they weren't beaten up, you know, they just drowned. How did that happen?
It turns out the 3 are Cuban refugees. 2 served time in Cuban prisons. The other was a Cuban cop. Since all 3 died from drowning, they're not homicides. That means there's no case for CENTAC yet.
Later that evening, we get a call that the night watchman from Jones Boatyard, 50 yards up the river from where these bodies were found, and he tells me that a few nights before, there was a knock at the door. It's the police. 12 police officers go into the boatyard, and they rush a boat called the Mary C. The crew jumps into the water, starts to swim away. The police officers start unloading something from the boat, and they leave. I said, well, did they leave their name? Did they, I mean, who were they? He says, look, they were dressed in blue. I don't know, they're cops.
So we thought it was a group of people impersonating police, City of Miami police, that were wearing blue uniforms.
So the first thing I did when I got back to the police department is I opened up the phone book and I called every single police department and I said, did any of you do a raid on the Miami River at this, at this location? No one had done any operations in or around that time, no one. But we're starting to put together a story, and the ripoff occurred right at the right time when they were just getting ready to take the boat. So somebody had inside information, apparently, that tipped off these police impersonators about this, so the timing of this was perfect.
Now, the drownings and the cops are looking suspicious.
They didn't go in the water willingly, and they went in there during the commission of a felony, so that makes it a crime. That makes it a homicide. It makes it murder.
But here comes a curveball. An FBI agent tells CENTAC the cops they're looking for might not be imposters. A bar owner drug dealer named Luis Rodriguez has been seen working with real Miami police.
And those police officers were ripping off drug dealers and taking their money and their dope and giving it back to this bar owner, Luis Rodriguez, to sell for them. I really started to feel extremely uncomfortable about that. My first reaction is that can't be right.
But before CENTAC can make contact with the bar owner Rodriguez, they hit a bit of a hurdle.
We had a neighbor that saw a pickup truck back up to a vacant lot, dump a box out of the pickup bed, and take off. It was a pretty nondescript, we would call it dump job. And inside was the body of Luis Rodriguez, covered in lime, which is highly unusual.
CENTAC gets a call from a Miami homicide detective with another juicy bit of information. Rodriguez has been an informant used by a Miami street cop working a midnight shift. The CENTAC investigators decide it's time to meet that cop, Armando Estrada.
He started to tell us a story about Luis and getting murdered and what he's hearing on the street. The guy was bad news, and I said, well, that's really interesting. I mean, how is it that you know that? And he looks at me and goes, oh, I have an informant. I go, well, that's perfect, because now I need to meet that informant. And he goes, well, give me a day or two and I'll dig him up.
2 days later, at 2 in the morning, Estrada introduces the CENTAC cops to his informant.
He says, oh yeah, listen, I know Luis, and this is what happened. And he starts to tell a story. But this guy, he's just a mope.
And he had mentioned about Luis Rodriguez, that Luis Rodriguez and apparently ripped off some people and was killed by those people. Alex asked him to tell him the story again, and he changed it a little bit, and it was kind of suspicious.
He would get stuck with his facts, and the police officer, Armando Estrada, kept saying, no, that's not how to tell him about this. No, you got it wrong, tell him about... So it was obvious to us that it was coached.
The CENTAC investigators suspect something is up with this one Miami cop. As they leave their meeting, they realize he is probably not alone.
We drive around the other side of the shopping center, and who do we see parked but another police car? And it turns out to be another midnight officer, who we later identify as Roman Rodriguez, who's there looking at us the whole time. So now we got 2 of them identified.
And we both knew at that instant that these were real cops involved as opposed to police imposters.
For the first time, the CENTAC cops know their investigation is about to get risky.
It's the most dangerous thing in the world. You know, there's nothing more dangerous than a crooked cop.
The CENTAC cops have only begun to unravel what will be the most explosive case of their careers. They have no idea how deep the corruption will go into the Miami PD. It's now August 1985. Miami investigators Alex Alvarez, Al Singleton, and George Plasencia are scared. They've just discovered a breed of criminal in Miami, even more dangerous than drug dealers: crooked cops. The CENTAC team identifies 2 Miami police officers as possible suspects in the July illegal drug raid on the Miami River: Armando Chino Estrada and Roman Rodriguez. The CENTAC investigators have a hunch Estrada and Rodriguez might have been involved in the river drug ripoff, but it was originally reported that 8 or 10 cops might have been involved. Who were the others? To find out, they interview Armando Unroque. Armando for short. He's a security guard who worked for murdered bar owner Luis Rodriguez. Welcomes them with an AR-15 assault rifle by his side.
And he asked us, "Aren't you afraid of the rifle that I may shoot you?" So I told him, "I think we can take you and drop you before you get to the gun." And he just started laughing. And he said, "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" So we started talking to him, and he gave us bits and pieces of information that he knew Luis Rodriguez, that, yeah, there's a lot of officers that would go to the bar, but wouldn't identify anybody, wouldn't give specific details.
In the meantime, investigators develop a list of suspects, all cops working the midnight shift in Little Havana. They decide to present the lineup to Armando
George and I were in the car with him. We just had this gut feeling. This is the time. This is right. It feels right. We're comfortable with this guy. I think he trusts us. I said, "Look, I got some photographs I'd like to show you, if you don't mind. Maybe see if you recognize these guys." And I took out the photographs of, half a dozen cops.
He just dropped them, and he goes, "You guys are good. You guys are good. I'm gonna tell you everything." That's when he started pointing out all the people involved.
A huge breakthrough for CENTAC. Armando says good cops started to become bad cops at the Molino Rojo, the Little Havana bar owned by Luis Rodriguez.
The City of Miami Police, the Midnight Squad, used to go in there a lot and arrest people. Luis was a little bit upset that these guys were turning away all his clientele, so he befriended one of the officers, Armando Estrada, and started telling Armando Estrada, "Hey, instead of coming over here and arresting all the clientele coming in here, why don't I tell you who are the ones that are bringing in drugs, and you can arrest them before they come over here."
Estrada takes Rodriguez's advice and begins making arrests outside the bar. Suddenly, street justice seems like an easier way to clean up Little Havana.
The word had gotten around that there was a bunch of cops that were pulling people over and ripping people off. But then again, the way I looked at it, if they were pulling you over, they had to know you were up to no good anyway. So you got lucky it was them and not the real thing. You lost whatever you had, but you were still on the street. These guys thought they were God, that they could get away with everything and anything.
Week by week, the stakes get higher.
After a while, Lewis started to manipulate Estrada and told him, listen, right now you're arresting people bringing nickel and dimes. Why don't I start setting up drug deals and have them bring ounces of coke or kilos, and you can stop them before they get here and take their drugs, or wait till they leave with my money and take the money.
Luis sees the value of having a partnership with a police officer and puts Chino to the ultimate test, to be on his payroll. It's a defining moment in Chino's life and career. For the bigger deals, Estrada needs the help of another midnight shift officer, Rudy Arias.
So it started with Estrada, Roman, and Rudy Arias. As they start getting greedier, they start getting information from Armando Un as well about people that are coming to buy dope, not coming to the actual Molino Rojo, but people that want to buy drugs, and they start setting them up.
According to Armando Un, he and Luis Rodriguez now set up larger and larger rip-offs. Arias brings in Arturo de la Vega, Osvaldo Coelho, and Armando Garcia.
I think Armando Garcia, of all the cops, is the most dangerous of all. Okay, his nickname was Scarface.
The midnight shift is now becoming known as the place to be for Miami police.
It's a brotherhood on that midnight shift. Word starts to spread and other people start getting involved. You had officers begging these guys, hey, next time you're gonna do a rip, take me with you, I need the money.
Now you've got your little gang of guys covering one another, falsifying reports, taking the drugs, taking the money, leaving a little bit for the police department. And, you know, nobody was suspicious.
With the cooperation of police, bar owner Luis Rodriguez sees an opportunity to expand the operation to the point where drugs first enter the city, the Miami River.
Luis Rodriguez had a friend by the name of Pedro Ramos, and that he knew that Pedro had contacts at a much higher level of bringing in drugs through the Miami River on these big boats.
According to Armando Un, the rip-offs escalate on July 12th at the Tamiami Boatyard. The cops raid a drug smuggling vessel called the Mitzian, a practice run for what will be the biggest dealer ripoff, the Jones Boatyard.
The cops are now playing with the dealers. Before, they were just taking from the dealer and getting the scum off the street in their own mind. Now, they were involved.
But they were brazen because they, from Tamiami, they caravan in their marked police units to Um's house with the kilos of cocaine in the trunk of the marked units. Only in Dade County.
2 weeks later, at the Jones Boatyard, they will play out the same scenario, but that raid will leave 3 men dead. When Armando Un finishes his story of how the cops came together, investigators find themselves in a catch-22. They need to move fast before the cops can hit again, but not so fast to make them suspicious, and definitely not so fast to put their own lives in jeopardy. They also know that Armando Un cannot be their only witness in court.
I think we're gonna need a little bit more evidence before we accuse decorated police officers of murder. We're gonna need more.
But we were under the gun as well that these guys could be out there doing other rip-offs. Now it becomes also a liability. If we know somebody's dirty and he's doing rip-offs and he continues to be out there doing rip-offs, we got to get that guy off the street.
Investigators now have a term for the rogue police. They call them the river cops. It's a race against time to build a case against them before they find out. To build a case against crooked cops, Miami-Dade investigators need witnesses to back up informant Armando Un's stories about the crooked river cops.
We started identifying and contacting some of these people that were ripped off. And again, not all of them cooperated, but the majority of them, surprisingly, actually cooperated when we approached them and asked them, listen, on this date, you came down to Miami with $70,000 to buy a kilo of cocaine and you were ripped off. And they surprisingly cooperated and said, yes, I did. And then we'd show them lineups and identified photographs of the officers. And that's how we started building the case.
For details on the Jones Boatyard raid, they turned to Pedro Ramos, the drug smuggler who allegedly set up the rip. Ramos explains that he made the plan with Estrada, Garcia, and Rodriguez. He's cutting the deal, 10 kilos of cocaine.
So you got a problem, my friend. You know, you got two options here. Your option is either to cooperate with me or stay on the street, because I think your fate is going to be the same as Luis Rodriguez, because I don't think these cops are going to leave you alive. And it was actually one of the easiest confessions I ever gathered, because he just right away said, look, I'll cooperate, I'll do whatever you want, you know, because, you know, there's no honor among thieves.
All this time, the river cops have no idea they're being investigated. They consider themselves untouchable and have become addicted to their lifestyle.
These cops, they became millionaires overnight. I mean, a kilo of coke was worth $50,000, $60,000 back in those days. And those two rip-offs, that was close to almost 900, 1,000 keys, so do the math. You know, they all became multi-millionaires.
They like the attention, they want more money. When you're a cop and you're from Cuba, you're making more money than they ever made in their entire life. And now, you're coming home with even more.
But the newfound wealth was also making some family members nervous.
Osvaldo Cuela, his father and mother were great parents, but they were suspicious. Osvaldo, he would get in his flashy Corvette and just race up and down the streets of Miami. And then, of course, you know, he's getting pulled over, and Coelho is whacked out.
August 31st, a little over a month after the Jones Boatyard raid, the Miami Herald uses Coelho's arrest as proof of rampant corruption in the local police department.
We were all stunned. We were stunned to know that our own police officers were criminals. That if we couldn't count on them, then who were we going to count on as a society?
You have a lot of power when you're given a badge. You know, you run the show out there. You just have to learn to control that power, not that power control you, and that's what these guys lost track of. You know, they thought that they owned the city.
The headlines also put more heat on the CENTAC investigators to do their job and stay safe doing it.
I was followed one time on 836 going home by a City of Miami marked unit, and I was flooring it, and he was right behind me, and then when we passed the Palmetto, which now goes into the unincorporated area, he backed off. So, I mean, yeah, you have some concerns. If they stop you, you don't stop them. They want to open up and shoot at you.
Investigators are scared and under the gun to get more evidence to build a case. The attorney's office has an idea. ask the informants to wear a wire and get new information from the suspects on the tape. Smuggler Pedro Ramos and security man Armando Un know it's risky, but they agree to do it.
The recordings between Un and Ramos were crucial, I think, to the case. Because it's the cops in their own words. And the cops would tell them how to avoid questioning by us, and they did admit to the rip-offs in the tapes.
On December 6, 1985, the investigators arranged one final meeting between Armando Un and river cop Roman Rodriguez, with Un again wearing a wire. But this time, there is a problem.
We were pretty much convinced that Roman Rodriguez was suspicious that Un might be wired. He started fumbling with his clothing, picking up his shirt. Hey, are you hot, buddy? That type of thing. And we became very concerned.
CENTAC investigators listen to the wire, horrified. Is their key informant, Armando Un, about to get caught? Without him, they have no case against the river cops.
For more Real Vice Miami, go to investigation.discovery.com.
It's December 1985, 4 months into the investigation of the notorious Miami River Cops. Police informant Armando Un is wired for a meeting with crooked cop Ramon Rodriguez, and Rodriguez is suspicious.
Come on, cancel, get out.
We're very cognizant of his safety and really took extreme measures to guarantee that if something went bad, we could get there in time to intervene.
Armando Un wraps things up and gets away. Rodriguez is suspicious but lets him go. The CENTAC investigators breathe a huge sigh of relief.
That's when we started getting some concerns about these guys next time might search him and find the body bug on him, and they may just kill him right there.
At that point in time, we all came to agreement that this is getting too dangerous. And at that point, we brought Un in to our protection, and that was the last recording we made.
The most exciting moment was when you get that warrant signed by the judge. Now you know you got him.
We knew there were 6 cops. We broke up into 6 teams, so there were 6 homicide detectives and 6 DEA agents. What we wanted to do was arrest everybody simultaneously at the same time.
I was assigned to arrest Roman Rodriguez, knocked on his door and opened the door, and just like death was on his face. He knew it was over. He didn't know what to do. Reality finally hit him.
For the river cops, their world was spiraling. Everything that they thought that they had achieved now was at jeopardy.
After the arrests were made and the initial media splash occurred, the next media splash was their first appearance in court.
The river cops hire the best attorneys dirty money can buy. They also have another big reason to be confident. They have a plan to kill one of the star witnesses.
As time progressed, we've got specific information that specific individuals had been hired to kill Armando Un. killer, Joe Martinez, was a street-level thug. Somehow had convinced one of the river cops he was capable of doing a contract hit.
Martinez is paid $50,000 for the hit. And runs to California with the money he's paid for the job. But Armando is not home. He's hiding safely in Puerto Rico. When the rip-off artists realize they've been ripped off, they become even more desperate. The CENTAC investigators feel as if they are now targets themselves.
There were times that we could tell that we were being surveilled. We knew that that was happening.
They knew people that I knew. A lot of them were liked in the department, and I was afraid that they would pass the word around, come after myself, my family, Alex. So we had some concerns.
After 9 months of preparation, the River Cops trial begins in October 1986. The city holds its breath.
I think what impressed me the most was how significant this case was to the city of Miami, to the history of Miami. The stakes were very high.
Even with tape recordings of Armando Estrada and Roman Rodriguez in evidence, most of the case hinges on the testimony of Armando Un.
The guy's a drug dealer with mental issues, so he wasn't always consistent with his mannerism and his demeanor at trial. Sometimes he would fly off the handle and say things that were bizarre.
In his worst moment, Un Roque misidentifies one of the cops, a mistake that may hurt his credibility.
The idea was, well, how can you trust this man? He's a drug dealer, plus he didn't get the right guy. So, it was obviously a point well in the favor of the defense. They did a very good job, a skillful job in pointing that out to the jury.
After 3.5 months, the trial comes to an end.
How do you find the defendants guilty?
The jury finds Estrada and Rodriguez guilty of racketeering and drug charges. But then, a bombshell.
There's a procedure after a verdict where either side can ask the judge to poll the verdict, to poll the jury. And what they do is they ask each juror to say, is this your verdict? And you say, yes, it is my verdict. So they went through, and then there was one gentleman who said, this is not my verdict. The courtroom was dead silent. So the judge was forced to declare a mistrial.
Hands down, the darkest day of my police career. So much work, so much time, so much effort, so much money. It seemed at that point down the drain.
The River Cops go free, and the CENTAC detectives are not the only ones at risk.
They knew they were going to retry the case, and immediately, instead of just thanking their lucky stars, they get out and they run back and they start to plan how they're going to get rid of Un and Ramos.
This time, the River Cops plan to see that their hit money is well spent. It is now February 1987, a year and a half since the deaths of the drug dealers at the Jones Boatyard. Because of a mistrial, the River Cops are free on bail until they face trial again. They now know that informant Armando Un is not a reliable witness for the prosecution, so they focus on eliminating the only other witness who could connect them to the Miami River crime, Pedro Ramos, the drug smuggler who arranged the Jones Boatyard ripoff.
They had received information where Pedro Ramos owned a video store, And they went out there on a couple of occasions with different types of handguns, a machine gun, a shotgun, to take out Pedro Ramos. And after a couple of days of surveilling him, they decided to put a contract out on him instead. And my understanding is that the hitman says, yeah, I'll do it, give me the money, and they're still waiting for the hitman to kill Pedro.
The river cops are ripped off by a hitman again. In May 1987, a new set of indictments is issued for the 6 corrupt cops. But this time, investigators are surprised to learn they have a major new witness. One of their own has decided he's had enough.
Rudy Arias, he surrendered, like I guess a few days later. Rudy then tells Alex, I got something to say to you, I gotta talk to you.
The last thing I thought that meeting was about was going to be about rolling over, or flipping as we call it. I think what ended up happening with him is his conscience got a hold of him, his ego got a hold of him, and he said, well, maybe I can come out and be a hero now. Maybe if I'm the first one to come out.
Alex Alvarez finds Arias to be a potential dream witness.
I debriefed him for months. He gave me details of things that happened, who was there, what time that happened, dates. He was extremely accurate with his details, and that was very, very important to us.
For the first time, investigators hear from the river cops themselves what really happened at the Jones Boyard.
The river cops meet at a 7-Eleven nearby. They come with their patrol cars and their undercover cars, and girls, and snorting coke, and here they are getting ready to plan to take down another fishing vessel, the Mary C. They get in their cars in the middle of the night and go down. No lights on, very quiet.
Late in the morning hours, I think it was 8 or 9 of the Miami police officers raided the boatyard. Cops quickly finished unloading the boat. They took the van that belonged to the drug dealers, they opened up the gate, and they all drove off.
They drove the van with the cocaine and some of the cars out, and then they abandoned the van.
It was the next morning that the helicopters and the media and the reports were coming in, and one of their officers went to work and heard that 3 dead bodies were found on the Miami River. And he went back and he said, look at this paper, 3 dead bodies found floating in the Miami River. In their minds, they didn't go there to kill anybody, but it was really a tragic accident. In the end, they paid for that. Those 3 dead bodies floating in the Miami River was the end of the Miami River cops.
Ironically, the river cops never intended to kill the 3 drug dealers that fateful night. They drowned because they couldn't swim, and there was no place for them to easily scramble out of the water. It was one of those things that was just meant to be. And to think the river cops might have gotten away with all of it if they hadn't decided to do one last job.
Everybody said, okay, we're happy after Tamiami. We don't need to do any more. And then Roman Rodriguez was desperate. He went to Chino and he begged him, please. And I think in the end, he was just desperate because his family was falling apart. He wanted to do it one more time.
Rudy Arias, the new star prosecution witness, not only confirmed all this, but he provided enough information to keep CENTAC busy for years.
When Rudy started cooperating, of course, our main concern was to shore up the charges we had against the other officers. He also was debriefed about generally corruption within Miami PD. And he named 67 names who were either corrupted or tainted by thefts, rip-offs, what have you, which is just an astounding number. It's like 1 in 10, which I think makes this corruption case the unprecedented in our nation's history. We knew it was bad. I don't think we knew it was that bad.
As the result of testimony from Arias and others, the river cops are either convicted at trial or enter plea bargain agreements. None of them are charged with the drowning deaths of the drug dealers. There are plenty of other charges to go around. Estrada, Rodriguez, De La Vega, and Garcia are each sentenced to 30 years in prison for racketeering. Star witness Rudy Arias receives a reduced sentence and later enters into the Witness Protection Program. Osvaldo Coelho is sentenced to 35 years in prison, but only after he is found and arrested in the Bahamas by Alex Alvarez.
I had a very candid conversation with him on the trip back, and he kind of tried to tell me, how this whole thing became unraveled for him. And what happened, he says, is that a senior officer that he respected, he saw him take money, and he said that's what, he says, it kind of shattered my image of what a police officer was being. It was never the same for me. The guy I respected, who I thought was a great cop, is just a crook. And I'm not better than him, so why should I? And I think that's what happened to him in his psyche.
Today, the CENTAC investigators are retired from police work, but their service transformed the city of Miami.
Any cop is highly offended by a corrupt cop, any corrupt cop. I think we all realized at the conclusion of this that this was not just another case. And I think we also had a sense of accomplishment that we actually did something positive for our profession, which we all take very seriously.
All we did was the River Cops case for almost 3 years. That's all we did. Nobody walked away. Everybody got convicted or pled guilty. Nobody walked.
The Miami River Cops also have a chance to reinvent themselves. As of 2011, they are all free men.
I have friends that know them, and they say that, whenever, they see some of my acquaintances, they say hi to, Placencia, say hi to Alvarez. I don't think there's any hard feelings there. I think that they know that we did our job and we did it right and we did it by the book, so. And they're not, some of them are not bad guys. Crooks, but not bad guys.